Hi, this is Russ Whitlock, and we're continuing our journey through the Texas White House as illustrated by my photographic book by focusing today on the living room. But since we have the opportunity to be in the front yard of the Texas White House, I did want to point out that the house that Lyndon knew in his childhood and his youth, and the home that he and Lady Bird would buy in the 1950s, was the part between the two gables. This was the home of his Uncle Clarence and Aunt Frank Martin. It was the big house on the river. It was the place where he would gather for family reunions and special events and holidays. So he had known this home since he was a very young child. Hal Rothman wrote in his book, LBJ in his Texas White House, he said, Lyndon Johnson entered the Senate at full steam and immediately associated himself with the old men of the Senate who held the power and the influence. These men were wealthy, and talk of their ranches and estates reached across political differences. Lyndon wanted that status. He wanted to be accepted and to maneuver at the highest reaches of the Senate. As Johnson emerged as a force in the Senate, the ranch served as a combination of confidence builder and calling card that helped announce his arrival. Johnson recognized the ranch as a political asset as well as a piece of his personal heritage. All the world is welcome here. That was a theme that resonated throughout the Johnsons' life here, and it was really symbolic of the welcome feeling that you received, whether you were an official or an unofficial guest to the house. While the world was welcome, it was also the most important place for Lyndon Johnson, and as Claudia, better known as Lady Bird, would later call it, it became their heart's home. For LBJ, this place represented his youth and family. It provided a place of solace, thought, relief, strength, and reflection. Now, the office was the official place of business, but every room in the house could be set up instantly for a meeting with the president, and it oftentimes was. Today, we're going to focus on this one room right here that is the only stone portion of the original house, because that was the first house built here by German immigrants in the 1800s. The stone and the first floor was all that was part of the original house. The first time I walked in that living room, I was struck by how unpretentious it was. In fact, it reminded me a lot of my grandmother's house. But the room and the house reflected the residence. There was nothing pretentious about the Johnsons. In fact, Mrs. Johnson is often remembered by saying that she wondered what the dignitaries across the world would think, these world leaders, when they visited the President of the United States at the Texas White House. Because there was no grandeur, there was no gold, there were no palaces, but it was the comfortable place where they were. And in fact, when you entered the living room or any other room in the house, you instantly felt a feeling of relaxation. The Texas White House was well documented by White House photographers and military photographers throughout his presidency. So it's very easy for the National Park Service to place furnishings and items significant to the family back in their exact locations as they were in the 1960s. That's part of the authenticity that was, and after renovation, will be one of the significant points of this house, that nothing has to be recreated. The living room, one of the things you notice is the copper pieces, the lamps and the copper kettles and pots across the mantelpiece. It was a favorite decorating metal of Mrs. Johnson. She liked copper. But the pots across the mantel were from the San Marcos, Texas Job Corps School, one of the programs that was created by Lyndon Johnson. The wall clock on the front wall is made of materials from Mrs. Johnson's grandparents' home in Alabama. My friend Shirley James told me that Mrs. Johnson used to really enjoy entertaining her husband with stories of some of her family. And she said her grandmother had, Mrs. Johnson's grandmother had 4 husbands, 13 children, and lived to be 85. Below the clock are the 3 televisions that were so symbolic of Lyndon Johnson always wanting to be in touch and knowing what was happening around the nation and around the world. Of course, at that time, it was easy to just have 3 TVs. You had ABC, CBS, and NBC. And these are similar to the same ones that were in the Oval Office, and later on you'll see in the president's bedroom. A card table in the corner, set for LBJ's favorite game of dominoes. This was one of his favorite forms of relaxation, especially when he teamed up with his local friends, because I heard a story told one time that he and preferred teammates had words or phrases they exchanged to alert the other of certain moves. On the wall above is a collection of arrowheads. Mrs. Johnson was rewarding Lucy and Linda in their childhood here with cash prizes for each arrowhead they found on the ranch. And then competition broke out between Lucy and Linda who could find the most arrowheads. Well, Linda won the competition. Come to find out later on in their life, Linda acknowledged that she had employed the efforts of some of the neighborhood children, from some of the other ranches, to help her find arrowheads and just split the proceeds with them. And of course, a telephone. There's a telephone, at least one telephone in every room. And it was always close to the president, sitting there beside one of the gifted recliners displaying the presidential seal. Lyndon remembered standing by the hearth as a child and reciting the Christmas story to gathered family. Christmas time in his adult life, you see the mantle adorned with greenery and family stockings. Of course, there's also a Kennedy-style rocker in the living room. LBJ continued to use those when he assumed the presidency because of their comfort, and he brought one down to the Texas White House also. Lucy's piano sits in the corner of the room. Near the end of my tenure, when I was going through the house with her and some of her special friends giving a tour, she actually sat down and played the piano for us a little bit, as you see in this little picture that I snuck. A photo of Uncle Sam Rayburn, the longest serving Speaker of the House and mentor of Lyndon, is hanging on the wall in the living room, and above it, an old letter from Sam Houston, a Texas general and statesman, reminding LBJ's grandfather of a loan that needed to be repaid. I hope you're enjoying these tours through the Texas White House as displayed in my book. The book is available at the LBJ Library and Museum in Austin, the LBJ National Historical Park and LBJ State Park and Historic Site, and some gift shops in Johnson City. The stories are fun, but the pictures are possible because of my good friend Scott Miller, the LBJ Library Archives, and the Friends of LBJ National Historical Park. I'll be back with another edition as we move from the living room into the dining room, and I look forward to seeing you next time.